Hey brewers, welcome back to BKA Brewing. It's brew day again, my favourite day of the week. Today we're going all grain and we're going to use our little friend here, the Digiboil. So for the all grain brew today, we're going to go with a light crystal lager. So to make up our grain bill, we're going to use 4.5 kilos of Atlas malt. So that should provide a nice light and clean pale malt profile. We're going to use 150 grams of the light crystal malt. So that should provide a little golden finish to the ending beer. Some sweet and caramel notes coming through there in the end as well. Also going to use 150 grams of acidulated malt. So that's just going to help drop our pH down a little bit, just to make sure it doesn't creep too high and it doesn't affect the end resulting beer at all. I use that because I don't bother with any change to the water chemistry. I really like how the Newcastle town water tastes, so if I'm happy to drink it, I'm happy to brew beer with it. We're going to use Pride of Ringwood today. That's a Tasmanian grown hop. So we'll be putting 10 grams of that in as a bittering hop at 60 minutes. We'll also be adding 15 grams in the last 10 minutes of the boil, just to add some little bits of flavours and aromas coming through there in the end. So that should bring us to about 15 total IBUs in the finished beer. And with the Pride of Ringwood, that'll just add some oak and herbal notes to that end resulting beer. Yeast strain today, it's going to be the M84 Mangrove Jack's Bohemian Lager. I'm hoping that that's going to provide a nice soft, dry and clean finishing beer. With the mashing schedule, our strike temp is going to be 71 degrees today, and we're going to be adding 20 litres of water for that. We're going to add the grain, and then we're going to mash at 67 degrees for 60 minutes. Then we're going to mash out at 75 degrees for the remaining 10 minutes. And I'm going to add 10 litres of Sparge water at the end, just to rinse out the grains. And the Sparge water will be at 78 degrees. In the last 15 minutes of the boil, we'll also be adding in a well flock tablet. Now, once all that's done and brewed, we will be pressure fermenting today. And I'll be making sure that I'm going to pitch that yeast at 18 degrees. We're going to ferment at 18 degrees at about 12 or 13 psi until fermentation finishes. No dry hopping, no nothing. Once the beer is finished fermenting, then I'll leave it to lager for 2 weeks before we hook it up to the kegerator and pour ourselves our first sample.
Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is turn on the Digiboil. And then I'm going to turn on the 1900 watt and the 500 watt element to bring it up to 2400 watt in total. Now I already have my 20 litres of water in the kettle, so I'm going to set my strike temp to 71 degrees. So we've just hit our strike water temperature of 71 degrees, and now it's time to add the grain bill.
In goes the 4 kilo Atlas malt, then the 150 grams of crystal, and finally the 150 of the acidulated. So now the grain bill's been added. It's just time to give this a nice big stir. Just make sure there's no dough balls present, which doesn't look like there is because we haven't used a huge amount of grain this time around. Alright, so I'll start our timer for the 60-minute mash at 67 degrees.
Okay, so the 60-minute mash is now done. So I'm going to up the temp to 75 degrees for our 10-minute mash out. I'll turn both elements on to reach that target temp quickly. So now that the mash out is complete, I'm just going to put this rod into the malt pipe here. I'm then going to pull that to the top of the Digiboil, and I'm going to use the little feet that are on the outside of the pipe that you can see there, just to sit it in the top of the Digiboil and let that water drain. While the malt pipe is draining, I'm just going to up the temp to 100 degrees so we can hit our boil temp whilst waiting. Now I'm going to add the 10 litres of Sparge water. So I've just had this water sitting to the side. The current temperature of that is 75 degrees. And then I'm just going to pour this over all of the surface area of the grain, nice and slowly, to extract any remaining sugars left in there. So now I'm just going to move this malt pipe off to the side, but before I do that, I just give it a little shake just to make sure that if there is any water left in that pipe still, it just drops through because it may contain some remaining sugars. So now I'm just going to put the hop spider in the top of the Digiboil. So the wort is now at about 100 degrees Celsius. So I'm just going to give that a nice little stir before we move on, because it's now time to drop in the 60-minute boil addition. So now that the 60-minute boil has commenced, we're going to add our 10 grams of Pride of Ringwood hops, which will just add some light bitterness to the finished beer. So now with 15 minutes left, it's time to drop in our well-flock tablet, which will reduce the haziness of the wort and provide us with a clearer finished beer. With 10 minutes to go, it's now time to add in our 15 grams of the Pride of Ringwood hops. So this should hopefully provide those oak and herbal aromas to the finished beer. So to chill my beer, I put it into a HDPE cube and then sit that in the chest freezer overnight to bring the temperature down before I pour this into the fermenter. So now that the wort temperature is 18 degrees, I'm just going to sanitize my scissors, sanitize the outside of the yeast packet, and then I'll slowly sprinkle the yeast into the top of the fermenter, just making sure that I get a nice even spread with no clumps. The spunning valve has been set to 12 psi, so now we're ready for fermentation to begin.
Okay, so the lager has been fermenting at 18 degrees for 5 days. I then bumped up the temp gradually for a diacetyl rest for 2 days. We then brought the temp all the way down to 2 degrees and cold crashed for 10 days. Then we did a closed pressure transfer from the fermenter into a keg, and it's now been lagering in the keg for the last 2.5 weeks. For me, that's good enough. I'm just very, very eager to dive in and have our first taste.
So the name I've given to this lager is the Crystal Ring Lager. Our starting gravity was 1040, final gravity was 1007. That gives us a final ABV of 4.3% and an IBU of 15.
Okay, what have we got? That pour just come out absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'm not sure if you can see there because of the condensation, but that's very, very well carbonated. It has a beautiful light golden color there. There's a nice little bit of head sitting on the top there. So far, retention looks pretty good, pretty tight. So with the condensation, it's a little bit hard to see, but it's a beautiful light, pale golden color. That's the type of color you'd want from your standard lager. It is a little bit darker than your standard lager, however, but that's just due to the light crystal malt that we put in. There's some really, really nice clarity there after the 10-day cold crash and the 2.5 weeks of lagering. If I left that for 4 weeks or a couple of months, that'd just come out even clearer. As I said, it's been a couple of minutes now, and that head is still holding on relatively well for a lager. All right, we'll go for a sniff, shall we? There's some very subtle smells there on the nose. Not a lot of hop aroma, because remember the late boil edition, it was pretty minimal. You can definitely get some of that grainy sweetness coming through, some of those caramelly toffee kind of notes that are coming from the light crystal malt. Yeah, there's definitely a soft herbal kind of earthy spicy smell to that coming through from the Pride of Ringwood, but as I said, not a lot, just very small. All right, we can now see there that as we leave it, the head just drops more and more. Anyway, I'm pretty keen to dive in for a bit of a sip here. Oh, first impression, straight off the bat, super crisp, super clean, exactly what you want from a lager. Yeah, that Voyager Atlas malt, it actually tastes very good, nice and clean. It does a really good job in this lager. A little bit of breadiness coming through from it, just perfect. Oh, there's a hint of that crystal malt there in the end. Just in the aftertaste there, some I'm going to say some caramelly or toffee kind of undertones there right at the end. The bitterness is, it's definitely restrained. Just remember, we only did 10 grams at the 60 minutes of the Pride of Ringwood. I think that ended up coming out about 15 IBUs, I think Brewfather said. But to me, that's just enough, just to balance with the malt there, just to combat a little bit of that sweetness coming through. I mean, for me personally, I don't want an overpowering bitter lager. I want something that's subtle, crisp, very sessionable, and easy to drink, which this absolutely is. Now, I haven't used Pride of Ringwood before, and I can understand why it gets some mixed reviews sometimes. You know, it's one of those classic old school Aussie style hops. I wouldn't say it's fruity or really florally at all. It's just that earthy kind of spicy old school flavours that you'd expect in your old school Aussie lager. Yeah, it's definitely not punching me in the face like any of those more modern day hops. Personally, I think this is a great entry level lager for someone who hasn't brewed a lager before, Allgrain that is, or someone who just wants a nice simple grain bill to then play around with different types of hops, different types of yeast, different types of specialty grains. I think this is simple enough for that. Sessionable, very quick and easy to drink, I can imagine, and didn't take a whole lot of time either. Like I said, I only had that lagering for 2 weeks, so I don't know, maybe you could even go less than and it would still turn out a pretty good beer. Now the question is, would I brew this again? Yes, absolutely. I love my lagers. The only thing that I might change is I might leave that 10-minute boil addition as is, but then maybe even add something in around the 5-minute, or maybe even the flame out as well, just so I can get a little bit more aroma coming through. I mean, it has that classic lager smell as well, but I would want a little bit more of the Pride of Ringwood smells just to come up through that glass. So yeah, I'd definitely brew it again, but I would definitely add in some more aroma hops at the end. I wouldn't bother dry hopping this. I don't think you're really going to get what you want out of that with the Pride of Ringwood hops. All right, well, cheers guys. Thanks for watching this full grain to glass video of this light crystal malt lager. Let me know in the comments below if you've experimented with light crystal malt before, or even the Pride of Ringwood hops, and your experiences and recipes with both of them. Cheers guys, happy brewing.